Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into Pivot 180 Weekly Boost. Today, we have an amazing guest all the way from Arizona. Is that correct, Daryl?
Yep, Arizona.
And Daryl is obviously from Arizona, and he is going to touch on the topic of healing to homeless. I'm sorry, homeless to healing, backwards. Apologies.
Feels that way sometimes.
From,
Yeah.
From homeless to healing.
Right.
If this is your first time tuning into Pivot 180 Weekly Boost, we offer humanity locally and afar, a source of positive encouragement through life experiences and insight in an open-minded and welcoming platform. So please keep your mind open and welcome everyone. We look forward to another amazing episode with Daryl and how he got himself out of the funk from being homeless into healing himself and then now healing others. So Daryl, I'll let you take the stage before I mess it up even more.
Well, Megan, I appreciate you letting me be on your show today, and it's quite an honor. My journey has been, my life has really been kind of tumultuous. I've known everything from homelessness to the penthouse, everywhere in between. But I kind of grew up in a. My mother worked three jobs. We grew up in Minneapolis, and I remember, coming home quite often to either an eviction notice or, having to move again right away because we either couldn't afford the rent or the place we were in got condemned, and it was a tough childhood growing up. And then she met what is now my stepdad, or was before he passed, my father. And we moved out of Iowa, or excuse me, out of Minnesota down to Iowa. And, my mom was still a pretty angry parent. So everything became a weapon, like the shoe, the belt, the brush, once I got hit with a bullwhip. And I learned really quickly, you run towards the whip and not away from it, because tip number one.
Powerful life lesson right there.
Yeah, run towards the whip. But then I moved away from home, and I had met a young lady that I fell in love with, and I wanted to marry, and we were going to start a life together. And so I ventured to. I met her in Liberal, Kansas, and we were going to move to Abilene, Texas. So I went ahead to Abilene and got an apartment for us and her two boys, and got a new job and was getting all started. And then 2 weeks later, I got a phone call, and she had been in a car accident, and she was in a coma. And her parents didn't like me because I was moving her away from them and taking her grandchildren away. So they didn't really appreciate that. So they never let me go see her. And then I found out, when she came out of her coma, she didn't remember me, and she didn't remember the life we were going to build together. So for me, it felt like she had died. And I laid in my bed every single day for 3 months, asking God for it to be the last day and to never wake up. And I had to sell everything that I owned in order to pay rent for those 3 months. And I didn't let my family know that I was in such a bad shape. I just kind of kept that to myself. And when I ran out of everything to sell but the clothes on my back, I decided to go back home for a short visit to Iowa. And my grandmother, she was the patriarch of our family, and she and I were doing dishes, and she got me to talking about my life and what had happened and how dark I was and how desperate my life had become. And my fiance, or my girlfriend's name at the time, was Debbie. And my grandmother asked me a very poignant question. She said, what would Debbie do, or what would Debbie say if she knew this is how you were acting? And I said, well, she'd probably slap me. And without missing a beat on the wash of the cloth, my grandmother just said, consider yourself slapped. And it sent chills. It still sends chills on my arms whenever I say that. And at that moment, I knew that I had to pull myself out of my desperate hole and move forward. So I went back to Texas and gathered up my stuff. And um, I'd always wanted to come to Arizona. So I said, well, what the hell? I'll just come to Arizona. And so I actually lived out of my car for a while. Um, this was pre cell phone time, so there was no one to call and nothing to do. And um, you know, I would go to people's apartments where they're outside playing tennis and walking or whatever, and I would convince them to allow me to spend a night on their couch so that I could shower and go find a job. And I would go down to the plasma bank and sell blood for gas money, um, because I didn't want to be one of those people that just stood on a street corner. I wanted to find my way out. And God, universe, however you want to say it, is pretty awesome when you allow them to be. So I was on a corner. It was September here, so it was still pretty hot, 100 and some degrees. Um, was in my suit jacket and my tie, looking for work. Had the want. This was back when you actually had to look at the want ads, right? You
Right.
had to go through,
Newspaper.
yeah, the newspaper. So I was standing on this corner and I saw this restaurant across the highway. And I knew that I couldn't afford to go and eat. It was a buffet style restaurant. And I knew I couldn't afford to eat, but I also knew that I was thirsty and wanted to get out of the heat. So I had a choice. I could either go into the gas station and get a soda, or I could go over there and sit in the air conditioned booth, right? So I went over, went through the line, only got my soda because that's all I could afford. Sat down and I was going through the want ads, and the manager came over and he said, I notice you're looking for work. Would you want to work here as a manager? Because they had three types of managers,
Hmm.
right? Like, sure, right? I don't know anything about restaurants, but sure. So he gave me an application and I filled it out. And he said, when our regional manager comes in, I'll have him give you a call. Well, I'm living out of my car, traveling from place to place. So probably not going to ever happen, right? So he went away, and I continued to look through the want ads. And 5 minutes later, the regional manager actually walked in the store, interviewed me, and hired me. So I now not only had a job, but a job that one of the benefits was a meal every day. So I was able to work there. I still had to stay on random couches until I could save up to get an apartment. And then I was
That
able
was just that
to,
little tidbit of hope at that point,
yeah,
right? To keep going. It's like,
just
hey,
enough.
this is answered right here in front of me. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And if if it hadn't been for my grandmother saying those prophetic words, I probably would have gone back and ended it, because she had become my lifeline, my girlfriend, my fiance, and I loved her. And she was taken away from me in such a fashion. I didn't get to see her while she was in the hospital. She woke up and didn't remember our life. Her parents kept me away from her, the entire time. And I was destitute, right? So I was very blessed. But then my life didn't just become sunshine and roses. I hadn't even unpacked my car because there wasn't a lot to unpack, a couple boxes and my clothes. And I was in my apartment, and my job said, "Hey, we need you to be in Dallas on Thursday." Well, that was a Tuesday. So I'm like, well, there's not much to pack, so guess I'll just get in the car and drive.
Right.
So I ended up in Dallas working for them for a while, and then uh, I think I spent a couple more years at the restaurant, but I'm kind of feisty, and I have this thing called ethics, right?
Right.
And we had been doing Thanksgiving packages where you'd put all the meals in a box and then they'd buy the box for their Thanksgiving dinner, right?
Hmm.
Turkey, trimmings, pie, all that stuff, right? Well, this lady brought the day after Thanksgiving, she brought back her pie with 2 slices left. And she said, "You guys gave me the wrong pie. I want my money back." And I'm like, "No, you ate the pie clearly." Right? She's like, "Yeah, but it was the wrong pie." And I said, "Well, if it was the wrong pie, why did you eat it?" "Well, I had to serve my guests something." Okay. And so she ended up calling corporate, and they not only gave her her money back, they gave her a $50 gift certificate on top of it.
Hmm.
And I'm like, if you guys aren't going to back us in the store when we're trying to save you guys like money, like, no. So I quit, right? And ended up getting a job in a warehouse, just driving forklift and whatever. But then that job ended, so I had a severance package and a job that all my bills were finally paid. So I just got in the car and drove from coast to coast for 30 days. And again, this was pre cell phone days, so I just opened up Rand McNally and mapped out where I wanted to go. And I went from Dallas to Charlotte, North Carolina. I drove from Charlotte out to Seattle, Washington. Um, I drove to Seattle because I wanted to have a meal in the Space Needle. And that was the only reason I wanted to be there. So I had my meal in the Space Needle and left. It was like, that was all I wanted to do. And then drove all the way back to Dallas. And then when I was done, I said, well, where do you want to live next? Charlotte looked good. I guess I'll go to Charlotte. Right. And so I ended up in Charlotte. I got a job selling home water systems to people who didn't even have cement floors and no doors on there. Like these were dirt
Right.
floors and no doors, but they had the great big satellite dishes.
Yes. Yes.
And so I ended up being pretty good at that. Um, and then they promoted me to Columbia, South Carolina, which was never a promotion. There was nothing promoting about Columbia. So I quit that job and went back home for a while. And then I got tired of shoveling snow, and I'm like, well, I did like Phoenix when I was there for those brief moments, right? Um, but so I came back here, and this has been the third time that I've lived here. But when I was homeless, I went downtown Phoenix, and I didn't know the area. And downtown Phoenix was not a place to really be. But I checked into the YMCA for a night because I didn't want to be in my car. And it was so scary that I said, F this, and went back to living in my car because the YMCA was more scary than living on the streets.
Wow. So how did you get into what you're doing now? You're working with people now and in a healing space. What are you doing as what you say as a type of healing?
Well, I consider myself a transformational coach, impact driven movement maker is what I really am. I want to change people's lives. And my biggest thing is that I can show you how to make your mess your message so that it can be a survival guide for somebody else. Right.
Gotcha.
I've been interested in self help and personal development most of my life. I've always wanted to be a speaker and a trainer and a coach. And um, several years ago, I got the opportunity to join the John Maxwell team and get certified in those areas. And it, it propelled me closer to what I want to do, but I was still playing small and playing within my own shadow. And all of those trials and traumas, it was easier for me to help others overcome theirs than it was to overcome mine, right?
Right.
It was always easier for me to transform their lives than it was to transform my own. And I wasn't really able to fully step into that until I met my wife and found someone with unconditional love and unconditional belief who would tell me every day, you don't need more certifications, you don't need more plaques, you don't need more things. You have everything you need right in your heart, right? And I realized that I've been helping people for 40 years. I don't care if it's a bar, a stranger, somebody I know, someone I'm working with. They've always been the ones who've come to me, and I've been able to help guide them. I always say when I lived in Dallas, there was a a leather store that was going out of business. And so I always wanted a leather coat. So I went in there, and while I was in there to buy my coat, I sold 3 other coats to 3 other people. Like, it's just helping has been in my nature, right? So I've learned
Definitely
to step
relate to
out of
that
my
for sure.
yeah, I've learned to step out of my own way. And actually, my company I named Praxis 33 because Praxis is the integration between thought and action, and 33 is an angel number of success and prosperity. And so I wanted those two things to merge because my philosophy is that I'm where the woo meets the work, right? We have the spiritual help and we have the guidance and we have God, universe, whatever your belief is, but we still have to do the work because I can hand you a shovel, but a hole is not going to get dug until you do something with it,
Right.
right? So I think it's a combination of doing those two things. And my um, passion is to give back to others because I know what it was like to be desperate and destitute. And if I can avoid somebody feeling hopeless or helpless or can transform their own life to get out of their own way, that's exactly what my purpose here is to give back to those who helped me when I was that way.
Right. And you've already been through it. And obviously, you're still going through some of it and still growing, not giving up. And so, by your example, you're also helping others and you can give them real life advice because this is something that happened to you, that you experienced, and you were able to work through it. And now you're able to share that with others and have that energy exchange with them to let them know that, they're not alone.
Yeah, when I was working, I had a job at the university here. I was helping people get their doctorate degree. And one of the benefits was being able to help them identify their why and get back on their purpose, right? And I would flat out tell my students, and when I say students, I'm talking about people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who are, high level executives or principals or, whatever, trying to get to that next level. But I would tell them, first thing, I have a set of boots and a set of pom poms on my desk. Which are we using today? Because are we going to kick you in the ass or are we going to hug you? I don't really care, right? And then I would always tell them, and I'm sure Q&A or QA got tired of hearing me say this, but I'm not here to be Willy Wonka. So I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. We're going to have an open, honest conversation, right? And so I would spend 2 hours sometimes with these people redefining their purpose and their why so that and I've had numerous people who've now got their doctorate degree who've come back and said, the only reason I have that is because of the counseling and conversations we've had. So even as I wasn't calling myself a coach, I was coaching people,
Right.
to their best life. And as a psychologist, well, someone with a psychology degree, um, I've learned that in the midst of a bunch of crap, there's a pony in there somewhere, and your job is just to find your pony, right? Because we all have crap, we all have stuff that's hurt us. We all have
Right.
past traumas that we're trying to heal over, but it's there to form a purpose that you may not see yet. And you may not even see that purpose fulfilled for 10 or 15 years, but you got to still dig for your pony and you got to still find your reason out of the shit. Like maybe it's fertilizer to help something else grow,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. That's one of my things. Is shit helps things grow,
Yeah.
and the Buddhism, they have the mud flower or the lotus flower, and that only blooms. So your life only blooms after you've gone through shit
Mm-hmm.
or in the midst of shit. So
Yeah.
you can either, and that's one of the that's I think the only flower that actually germinates and seeds at this and flowers at the same time, something along those lines. So it does two different things at the same time, and the symbolism with that is just like, think good things can come out of like the crap in your life, like you were saying. It's
Yeah.
just that you have to look at it a different way and find those different tools and utilize them for the best, in the best way that you know how, and then just keep getting better at it each minute, each day, however long it takes.
Yeah, I think that's a huge distinction that people they take their past mistakes or their past life, and I'm guilty of this too, and we use it against ourselves for why we can't be successful or why we can't
Mm-hmm.
turn out of that, right? Oh, I did this, so I'm done. I can't be better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a bullshit mindset, right? You can be better. What you're not willing to do is the work required to be better. Like everyone wants this magic wand fairy dust thing, right? But if you don't do any of the work, it's not going to get better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for all of us to have some kind of community, whether it's, an outside community or a family or a friend or whatever, who can give you that hand up, when you're in those situations. Because even even as success has come, I still have doubts. I still have those moments of like not good enough, not, I whatever. And if I didn't have a community around me who saw the things that I don't see, then I would stay there, right?
Right.
So
And having that community is so like just that support system, and then also it's kind of like having that warm coat in the winter.
yeah,
It's a warm feeling when you may feel cold internally and that kind of thing. There's a book called Happy Money where Ken Honda talks about your support in your community. Whereas, okay, you may not have money for this week, but if you have 52 friends that you can spend a week with them and do the dishes, do that kind of stuff. So you'll have a roof over your head and meals and stuff a, for a full year if you have the 52 friends. So money isn't everything, but the support system and the community can be, and it will just help you keep growing along those lines.
well, and I think like in my personal situation, I hid. I didn't want to let my father down. He adopted my sister and I when he married my mom, and he was the most honorable, giving man that I had ever been around, and I didn't want to let him down. So I hid it. I didn't open up and say, "Hey, you know, this is where I'm at." And so if I didn't ask for the help, if I hadn't opened up to my grandmother, I wouldn't have ever gotten out of any
Mm-hmm.
of that. You know, my father was the kind of man who, like when I lived in Dallas, after I had just moved there and transitioned from where I was to where I was going, he sent me a letter, and all the letter said was, "Son, keep the faith. Love, Dad." Like it wasn't this long dissertation. It was just basically, "I believe in you, and it's going to be okay."
Yeah,
And that was enough to propel me to keep me going.
that's awesome. Well, Thank you so much, Daryl, for coming on Pivot 180 Weekly Boost. And if anybody was wanting to reach out to you, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
They can reach me at daryl@praxis33.com. That's an email, or they can find me on Facebook. And I'd be happy to talk to anyone or help anyone that needs it. And I just appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share a small part of my journey, and hopefully it resonates with somebody and shows them that there's a way out.
Yes, that is definitely the intent of this podcast, is to help people know that they're not alone and to go to for the resources, or reach out, to people who may have been through something similar and found their way out, that it is possible, and get those tools and resources so they can start digging their way out too.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and joining us for an awesome episode with Dana next week for the last episode of 2022, bringing in the new year of 2023. Thanks so much, everybody, and we will see you next week.